Why are AI brands opening cafes? Why does Miu Miu have a book club? Why does A24, a movie studio, have a membership club, a publishing arm, and now Cherry Lane, its own theater and a bar? It's not random. It's a new operating model. And the best CMOs already know it. They're not running marketing departments. They're running production studios, orchestrating content, products, experiences, and collaborators like a showrunner builds a world. Today, we unpack why every business is now show business, why the modern CMO isn't a marketer but a showrunner, and what are the hidden formulas behind these operations. Welcome to the season 2 of Hitmakers, the show that tracks how culture moves margins, multiples, and market cap. Hello, Lee.
Hey, Anna.
What is new?
Well, what have you been up to the last couple of weeks since we did the last episode? You're in LA, weren't you?
Yeah, I was in LA for a client meeting. It was a quick 48-hour trip, but I managed to squeeze in a visit to Just One Eye, this concept space that sells jewelry and fashion items that was temporarily turned into Versace showroom. So I saw the newest Versace collection, and I have to say it does look good. It's really well done. Everyone is talking about the prices with a very good reason, but it's really well done. And then I went next day to meet a friend at Erewhon, and for my efforts, I was rewarded with the sightings of Bad Bunny. So
at Erewhon?
I have a smoothie. It was the Goddess smoothie, not the Hailey Bieber smoothie, but it was really good. So what about you?
What are they, $30? Is that what it is?
No, 19. Very reasonable.
Oh, 19. I don't know. At that point, might as well be $30. It's sort of like a magnitude of similarity.
It was really good.
Was it worth the $19? Is it a 19? Does it taste like a $19 smoothie?
Again, you're better positioned than I to talk about value and worth. All value is perceived value, as Lee likes to quote his favorite Austrian economist. We'll get to that later, Lee. That's another
I think
podcast.
that's the first time that Austrian economics has been brought into a sentence about Erewhon smoothies.
Hey, let's just keep going. It may come up again. It was excellent. It was excellent. And you know what made it worth it? It was the prettiest people I've seen in a really long time. The coolest people. Leah Kabede was there with her daughter and a number of African models that were all unbelievably gorgeous. Orlando Bloom was there with the tiniest dog, the size of Labubu, and his son and a friend. And again, as I said, Bad Bunny was there, and you know the people watching was just totally.
And this was like for the 10 minutes you were at Erewhon, you saw all of this.
I was there 45 minutes, and yes.
Wow, that's an intense concentration of sightings.
45 minutes, like totally worth it. Again, $19 is like, you know what? I would have happily paid double.
Are they just like all milling about wanting to be like seen at Erewhon? Is that like the thing?
Hanging, like they were sitting down enjoying whatever they ordered. I did buy some muffins and they were $11. And I'm like, this is so reasonable. You know, we live in New York and everything. We leave a house and it's like $150 for leaving a house. So this was like, you know, $11. Perfect.
Well, it's all relative, right? There's no such thing as price. There is only what the willingness to pay is relative to other contextual information.
After paying $19 for a smoothie, $11 was like, you know what?
Honestly, we should
everything
totally.
Looks so photogenic. You know, when you enter Erewhon, people, produce, packaging, everything is so photogenic. So I was like, maybe it rubs off me.
Maybe, yes, maybe. It's all well lit for photo shoots. That's what it is.
Well, do tell me about your week.
Oh man, I don't even remember what I did. It's one of those times where everything's so busy, everything just blurs together into a gray blob of nothingness, and it's hard to like remember what you did or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any trips coming up. I'm going over to Texas soon, but that's the only trip recently that I have planned. I always really like going to Texas. It's probably, we're going to fly into Austin for a little while and visit a company that I invested in and stuff and spend some time with them and understanding the business and so on.
Some of us are making money and some of us are spending.
I'm not making money yet. Hopefully. It's in the energy space. So We can talk about Erewhon. We could talk about future energy investments. Again, this is the style of the podcast. You don't know Hailey Bieber and Bad Bunny sightings at Erewhon. Now let's move into energy infrastructure and like capitalization tables of futuristic energy consumption.
Speaking of, let's move to market moves and Hailey Bieber, because Elf in very strange transparency move released Rhodes results, and they're kind of crazy good, no?
This is where we talk about market moves, a segment where we track how culture is moving markets. And just like Anna said, Elf just disclosed the full P&L for Rhode, Hailey Bieber's skincare brand. Every margin, every cost, every pound accounted for. That's something we almost never see in the beauty world. Rhode hit $220 million in D2C revenue with 34% EBITDA margins. That's nearly double what most legacy brands target. Their COGS are just 19%, and for comparison, most beauty brands sit around 25 to 30%. Marketing-wise, just 11%. And while most DTC brands burn through 30 to 50% on customer acquisition, Rhode's marketing efficiency ratio hit 9 to 1. Elsewhere, Miu Miu posted a 41% year-over-year revenue jump for the 9 months ending in September, one of the strongest performances in the luxury sector this year. The Prada-owned label has leaned into youth culture, viral accessories, and fashion-forward casting to drive demand. Meanwhile, LVMH only had a 1% increase in third quarter revenues. And it's not a podcast unless you're talking about Taylor Swift. It was reported that Taylor Swift's The Life of a Showgirl pulled in $135 million globally in its first week, including $80 million in the US alone and over 4 million album units sold. The success has been driven by a well-engineered, full-stack fandom machine of album variants, bundled formats, scarcity loops, merch, eventization, and of course, Swift's parasocial flywheel. Meanwhile, in early October, for those of you who are in New York, you probably saw that Anthropic brought its cloud brand into the real world. It opened a cafe at the former Vanity Fair editor Graydon Carter's Airmail newsstand in Manhattan's West Village.
Not anymore, Graydon Carter's. It's now Puck's.
Well, that's why I said former.
Okay.
The
former Vanity Fair editor. Look at you. Sneaky. Former Vanity editor, former Airmail. Go on.
Anyway, let me do my thing. The activation drew thousands of visitors and produced over 10 million social media impressions. Their baseball caps emblazoned with the word thinking became a hot ticket item, with customers sharing them on social media for cred. Also, luxury stocks rallied on renewed signs of life in China. LVMH and Hermès led the rebound, up 97% and 86% this year, as wealthy Chinese consumers slowly re-enter the market. Brands are shifting from expansion to exclusivity, offering private shopping, VIP shows, and immersive brand experiences to reignite demand. Since July, nearly $80 billion in luxury value has returned to European markets, but growth expectations remain cautious. The focus now is fewer stores, deeper spend, and a new playbook for cultural relevance. And finally, what started as a throwaway TikTok from singer Sophia James turned into a full-blown viral sensation. She posted 7 random videos. One of them, Group 7, took off, racking up over 35 million views and sparking a self-declared tribe called Group 7 Forever. Then brands jumped in. Pizza Hut dropped a 35% off Group 7 code. Applebee's launched a 7 Baddies promo. Hyundai changed its TikTok bio to the unofficial car of Group 7, and Fenty, Pepsi, Oreo, Slim Jim, and even NFL teams followed. This is brand cultural participation at its purest. Not inventing the story, but knowing exactly when to enter one. So that's a bunch of stuff, Anna.
A lot's happening in this world, Lee.
And it's interesting because you see a lot of the same mechanics and a lot of the same lessons used in a lot of different places, whether it's Taylor Swift or fashion brands or Anthropic and so on. But there's 3 areas that we're going to dig into today, get into this idea of how every business is in show business. So the first one is what's happening with Saint Laurent.
Yes, love that. For me, one common thread is analog culture and how analog is making a comeback almost at the same time as digital and AI. That's kind of that synchronicity and coincidences that are happening when AI is gaining steam. Analog is also gaining steam when you have like clubbing and bars, no phone bars, and when you have vinyl, and we have book sales in 2024 have never been higher, rose 6.5% year on year compared to the previous year. I'm curious to see figures in 2025. And just overall thinking how when you don't know what's going to work, like Group 7 is a great idea, basically releasing 7 different pieces of content and see which one is going to perform best. What is the constant? Intellectual property is the constant, and how you bring your intellectual property to life, that idea, that story. It can live as a cafe, like Miu Miu cafes, Miu Miu book club, or it can live as a thinking cap. It's a promotional strategy. People loved it, people hated. It did not go unnoticed. Or it can live as hospitality, that is a restaurant, that is a movie theater, that is a beauty brand, that is, like ideas live in many different tangible formats. And basically, if one fails, another is not going to fail. So luxury brands from LVMH and Kering, what you mentioned, Saint Laurent, they're opening a movie studio. So not movie studios, production arms. So LVMH has 22 Montaigne, called after their location in Paris, and Kering has Saint Laurent Studios. Emilia Perez was the movie that got a lot of Oscar attention and some wins. And more recently, Jim Jarmusch's short movie, Father, Mother, Sister, Brother, presented at the Venice Film Festival. That's just one. They have a lot going on in their pipeline. And they put a lot of their products in terms of product placement. But we also have other examples like collaborations between Jonathan Anderson and Luca Guadagnino on Queer, on Challengers, because those two are friends. And Jonathan Anderson did costumes for both. And which for me sort of opened up a question, well, why did they stop there? Why didn't they create a capsule for Challengers for Loewe and put them in stores? Because Jonathan Anderson was then a collaborator, a creative director, what I'm talking about, a creative director at Loewe. And so if it goes both ways, if luxury brands are creating movie studios, why are movie studios not creating retail arms and literally compensating actors for wearing designs and literally creating capsules from movie studios, not like glorified merch, not merch 2.0, but full-blown collections from movies, creating shop-in-shops, creating capsules from movies, because people are buying into a world. Retail is the story. It's not just something used to promote the story. You do want to buy what Zendaya wore in Challengers. You do want to buy what Daniel Craig was wearing in Queer movie, or you do want to buy what in a number of different, you kind of like identify with the character, or you love what the character wore and you want to buy the whole collection. So I think that's a giant opportunity. And I don't know who is doing that now. And those costume designers are amazing. And again, what is the difference between costume designer and a fashion designer? And I think we're going to see more of that talent interspersion, which is again going to get me, how are you hiring? When you're hiring for a fashion brand, do you hire from the fashion brand pool, or you go into hospitality, or you go into journalism, or you go to outside? So just a massive area that I'm super interested in, and I have been exploring on the sociology of business in a number of analyses.
So but let's dig into that a little bit, specifically the St. Laurent thing. So, I think it's meaningful that they won the top festival prize at the Venice Film Festival, the Gold Lion, because that's not their core business model, producing movies. Their core business model is producing fashion lines and moving, apparel and accessories and jewelry and so on. And so why get into that business? Why get into the film production business versus partnering with a film production studio more deeply and more systematically in the kind of like what you were saying? Like, don't just style all the characters and be the costume designer for the movie, but go deeper, do partnerships, do collabs, do spin-off content and stuff. Why do you think Saint Laurent needed to have its own production studio and as part of its business model?
Again, we're going back to IP, to owning intellectual property, and to telling stories in that cohesive way. If you own all of it, it's yours forever. If you hire a production studio, then rights expire, copyright expires, trademarks expire at the end of a day. Like this, you own that forever and you have that control to put your own products. And for me, the same goes for 22 Montana, for LVMH. And right now, you can have the best directors and best actors work for you and give creative control or not give creative control. Is just that fashion brands, luxury brands, they're incredible stories. All human stories and stories of creativity are incredible stories or can become incredible stories. Even those that don't have history and heritage can be turned into remarkable stories.
I totally agree with you. And I think one of the really interesting signal of Saint Laurent choosing to add this to their business model operations as a P&L is not just that they want to produce content and diversify. It's that they recognize that the value of their business is not in the apparel. It is in the IP that informs apparel or informs fragrance or informs accessories and so on. And so if you understand that the business model is the IP, then you want to own the means of production for bringing that IP to market. So in the example of like Disney would be the sort of like classic example of this. You would never imagine Disney outsourcing its parks because they said, no, we're in the movie making business and we'll license our characters to a parks operator to do. They recognize it's the IP.
Correct. That's where it takes me to the beginning when you ask, it's kind of like, if I can own IP, why would I let copyright expire? Why would I license it? Why would I do a joint venture if I have intellectual property over whatever spin-off, whatever venture I'm doing? Then I'm not just making clothes, and I'm not just making content, then I'm just not just making feature films or experiences. That's not the business I'm in. I'm in any potential business. I can make a hotel tomorrow. I can make food line. I can make a restaurant. I can, whatever that is, the way I'm making money at the end, consumer facing, it doesn't really matter. I'm making money at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I'd be really interested. I don't know if you know anything about this, but like what kind of crossover do you think or know of is happening at Saint Laurent between the film production studio and the,
I don't think they're thinking the way we're talking about it. I think they're thinking as a vehicle to product place, as a product placement. Sure. Because Emilia Perez, they're head to toe their brands. So there was like, Saint Laurent glasses. They were like, Gucci. It was just like head to toe carrying brands. And I think even not even carrying brands, they were head to toe Saint Laurent. Yep. And so there was like, we're just going to create our own ad, which is one way of doing it. The way we are talking is the future in 10, 20 years when you're actually saying, I'm going to own this entire world. I'm going to create the world and I'm going to own every single piece of it. Like, again, Disney, but Disney on steroids. Because if Disney had food and restaurants and hospitality and books, I mean, they own a lot of that because Disney even hired now this streetwear guy, Bobby Hundreds, I mean, that's his Instagram name, to not create the next level merch, but help them with the drops, with the sort of retail aspect of
so you hired him for the business aspect of it, like teach us the mechanics of this.
Correct. So you see, like they're kind of thinking ahead. I don't know where that's going to, I haven't heard anything since. It was a year ago. So I don't know where they're going to take it. Maybe it's just for merch. Again, I don't know. And they're very good at merch. But when you also think about Mattel, they have, I read somewhere about 45 movies coming up. So you see that is somewhere where kind of retailers are thinking about creating content. Where I am also interested is how are studios creating retail, because exactly what I was explained, people do want to participate in those worlds beyond just enjoying a piece of content. There are product lines, there are capsules, there are full collections, there are brands. Movies are brands. And why would they stop when you exit the movie theater? They start way before, and then you have during, and then you have after. And you want books, you want to wear that. You want to maybe eat that, you want to wear the accessories, you want to wear clothes, and so on. Like, very often when you watch TV shows and you're like, oh my God, I want to wear Succession wardrobe. That's like a known. And then you scramble to take a photo and to put it in ChatGPT and say, tell me what they're wearing. You know what I mean?
Are you describing your weekend? It's very detailed. You know the process very intimately.
Maybe. So but you see, like, this is a massive opportunity, and I just think that, like, there like, and there is money to be made. Again, like, oh, if you have creative direction for the movie, just extend it to apparel, and then either hire creative director. There's so many fashion brands, so just like hire one of them to create a collection, or like just hire a creative director to create specific, spin off a temporary brand for that. A24, Brutalist, amazing knitwear. Just like hire a line out of it instead of making stupid t-shirts that said Brutalist on it. Like, how many t-shirts from A24 one needs to?
I bet there are people who have entire closets full, but
look,
I think
I just wanted to say that there is like a lot of them. They have the tools, they have everything, and like good for them. Like, that's the strength of their brand. Again, how you need to grow, and it's great that you have a theater. It's great that you have that space in West Village and a restaurant, but it would be also even better if they had a hit in the past year. Because first fix the core business and then go further. But that's a separate.
Yeah.
So I do think also that has a lot, like it does touch upon a lot of things that I am interested in, which is, again, and that you and I are interested in, which is that the portfolio approach, which is also how do you organize for a constant cultural production and constant creative. How do you organize as a movie studio, which is how do you pull in the best creative talent at all times, which means that your creativity can be siloed in your creative department or your marketing department. And then also, like, how do you hire talent? Because, like, who did Saint Laurent hire? They did go to Hollywood. They did hire the best director, Jim Jarmusch. They hired Adam Driver. They hired, like, Chloe Sevigny was in that movie. They had also Kate Blanchett was in there. These are Oscar winners. This is the top talent that they wanna be in those movies.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the Saint Laurent brand is a pull to pull in that top talent. Like, I think if a unknown luxury fashion brand
was great, the money was there, the director is great, like that, like their award was attached to it, and so on. And so it doesn't really matter at the end of the day who is the producer if you have unbelievable creative projects.
I think the interesting thing about the Saint Laurent thing, it maybe we're giving them too much credit for some of the thinking, but at least it provides a really interesting object lesson in at least what could be, because, this whole idea of brands making content is nothing new. I mean, I remember really early on in like the 2000s, BMW did the BMW Films thing, which was very famous. But it was, to your point, it was just treated as marketing content. It was sort of like a longer form, more interesting, higher cost commercial where it was product placement for BMW. Very successful at the time, but I think what obviously you and I are talking about is very different. It's not just about creating more prestige or premium, longer form content that ultimately serves a marketing purpose. I think that happens just by the nature of creating something like a movie and putting it out there. But the bigger point here that we're leaning into is that it's really more about IP cultural production and being able to produce a lot of that, but then also to be able to monetize it and understand the different ways that you can create value and capture value in doing that from a single piece of content. Like, one of my all-time favorite examples in this is oddly, the NFL. I think the NFL over its history has done a remarkable job of taking a game and finding so many different ways to carve it up and extract value from it, whether it was moving a game from Saturday to Sunday and doing Sunday football and selling the rights of that, creating the Super Bowl, selling the rights to that, creating Monday Night Football, selling the rights to that, creating Thursday Night Football, selling the rights to that, and on and on and on. And you spin off all these different ways of defining the value. Of course, then they have NFL films, which they create value from, and of course the merchandise and all that type of stuff as well. But you could bucket a lot of this under just marketing, but when you start being able to look at marketing as an IP product, then the conversation about monetization and bundling and packaging of value comes into the equation. And all of a sudden, marketing is no longer a cost center, as a lot of people talk about it. It's now a profit center. It's a diversification of the portfolio of income streams for a business. And that's a very, very different way of thinking about it. But to be able to do that, you have to have a production capability that is constantly producing IP for your organization. And in the case of Saint Laurent, that's why having it in-house is more valuable to them over the long run than partnering with a person whose business model focuses on prestige film production, for example. Anyway, that's what I find really interesting about it, because it has a lot of downstream implications for how it changes the nature and dynamic of a business, how it changes the nature and dynamic of marketing, portfolio development, revenue management, and so on, if a company chooses to go in that direction.
I think more and more are. And I mean, if you're talking about BMW films, why we just don't go all the way to the beginning of advertising and radio and soap operas, which again were created in order to sell soap, literally. That's why they were called soap operas, because you sold soap by creating stories. So which really does bring me to stories. And I do think it's not even marketing, as you say, it's literally the brand. Because the brand is an idea and a story as a narrative. Like, why are you creating something? For Apple, like, let's just take out the cynicism and the business aspect of it and say Nike owns running. Let's say they haven't owned running in a really long time, but that was the intention. Apple intention is to own creativity. So that is sort of the IP they started from, the brand. So it's not even the marketing is even more upstream. It's the entire brand. So if you turn brand into intellectual property and you say, we do want to own this area, running, creativity, telling stories for Saint Laurent, for caring about our founders, about our brands, what LVMH is doing. Or we are telling story about Dior, or what Chanel is doing. We are telling stories about Coco Chanel for 35 different angles. So either you're telling story about founders or you're telling story about the discipline. By the way, it's a massive miss that Iron Waffle Entertainment, Nike's studio and entertainment arm, did not tell a story about Air, which is a movie, Ben Affleck's movie about Nike, because they said, and I learned that last week, it's a great story. They were interested if it was a documentary, but they were like, it's a great story. It was, it was fictionalized, which is, I mean, that's what great stories are. Embellishments and, give me always a great story. So for me, IP is going more upstream. This is how you manage your business. You're in a completely different business. And that is right now what I'm most interested in. Why are brands, apparel brands, luxury fashion brands, ran like retail companies and not ran like entertainment studios, which run as IP, which says, we are going to tell this story. We are going to hire a producer, a production company. We are going to run a creative director who is going to bring the best talent, who is going to create, the entire organization is creative organization.
Yeah.
And we're going to, then we're going to create a lot of hits and some of them are going to work out and so on. And I know that sounds crazy, but I'm talking about the future. I'm not talking about the now. And that also is how you treat your archives. And it's then the media, the marketing, the experiences, the events. And Prada is doing that. They have Art Foundation. They have Prada Marfa, which at the beginning had nothing to do with them. They have the Yacht Cup. They have the Space Shoe. They have a Miu Miu Book Club. They have a cafe and a restaurant and so on. All of that is their IP. So one thing is fashion is not doing so well, no problem. Foundation is doing well. Yacht doing well. They're always in culture. Cultural production never stops.
So let's use that to talk about F1 and what the Mercedes Petronas team has been doing in F1. So to kind of get everyone on board into this. So back in January, Mercedes AMG Petronas quietly made a surprising hire for the F1 team, Eleanor Coleman. Eleanor was named the team's first ever styling and partnerships manager, a title more common at luxury fashion houses than Formula One teams. With Coleman, Mercedes is doing something we're seeing more and more across sports and entertainment, turning what used to be side stage marketing into a main stage business function. F1 viewership has doubled globally over the past 5 years, and among Gen Z, it's grown by 49% since 2021. Fashion, content, and culture are now the front door to fan acquisition. And I find that really interesting for exactly what we've been talking about before, where it is about looking at the walk up of the athlete to the stadium or the trip home from the stadium and saying, how does this become an IP moment for us? How does this define the way our team looks, the way people dress in our world and so on? And how do we leverage that to be at the forefront of a cultural conversation? Because, there's been, I think, so many of those shots of athletes walking to or from the arena, from the pitch, from the stadium, they go viral to see what people are wearing. Like, everybody's looking at that type of stuff. And so it's a really specific and unique form of cultural production. And if it is that, and people and the eyeballs and the attention are on that, you have to take it seriously and up level the strategy behind what you're doing there and not just let it be a happenstance, ad hoc type of part of your brand world.
I think that F1 has evolved from sport to lifestyle, and it's now fashion and luxury and hospitality and experience and food and drinks and more to come, and entertainment. There is Drive to Survive, which is like 41% of Gen Z women, especially in the US, and the growth in the US, when you look at it. There is Gordon Ramsay Kitchen, there are VIP services, there is Las Vegas, there is Miami, there is Austin, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Then you have Lewis Hamilton, who was, in the span of a weekend, Friday to Sunday, both at F1 and co-chairs of Met Gala, which is the biggest merger of fashion and sport that we've seen in this year, actually. That was in May, Miami to New York. He was dressed in Wales Bonner, who is now new creative director of menswear at Hermes, which is amazing. And then you have also Louis Vuitton sponsorship. Moët Hennessy is at the podium when they win the champagne that they open to celebrate. And then who designs the uniforms they're wearing when they're in the cars? So again, anything that can be monetized will be monetized.
Well, even like I can imagine them doing the uniforms and then doing like effectively cut downs of the uniform where you don't necessarily buy the whole uniform, but maybe you buy a jacket that feels like part of the uniform. And it's just a way again of, I mean, Nike does this all the time where you'll have like specialty jerseys on like a college football team or a basketball team, and then they go on sale at retail, you know, the following day, for example. Like we see that all the time, and they don't have to be like big lines. They can just be drops of like, you know, 10,000 units or whatever on it. But again, going back to the point that you made, it's cultural production. How do you constantly find every opportunity to produce culture and be at the forefront of that? Because I think, you know, in our conversations off camera, this whole idea that like, particularly in the marketing space, disruption used to be the core mental model. But disruption assumes a static environment where things are normal, things are conventional on repeat, and you have to disrupt that. But I think we're sort of like past that, where everything is constantly disruptive because everything's going after your attention. There's just so much stuff being put out there. And so this idea is it's no longer about disruption, it's more about orchestration. How do you manage it all, tie it all together, have it all reinforce itself so that it works as a brand world, so that it works coherently, but you're also producing enough on a frequent basis to build out the world and be part of some cultural conversation or be at the forefront of people's attention and stuff. And so you have to look for all these little moments to be able to do that where attention is going, like athletes walking to and from the stadium, for example, or a driver's uniform, a driver's outfit on camera. You know, how can you use that to produce a cultural product, a cultural artifact that can potentially build equity, drive volume, drive unit sales, and so on. And so I think it's one of those things that just represents a mental model shift that I don't hear a lot of people talk about, because I hear a lot of people talk about the specific tactics, which are all kind of like interesting of themselves. But when you step back and look at the pattern of the tactics, to our point at the top of the show, there is like a model and a very intentional engineered mechanics of how this stuff works, which is why Disney hired, you know, a streetwear designer to help them figure out how to employ those mechanics at the company.
That's that. And then for me, for Formula One, and just in general, for Saint Laurent, for 22 Montaigne, you have to have, and that's what I did for Formula One case study on the sociology of business, is you have to have a lot of cultural products. That's that portfolio approach, that your cultural programs, there is not anymore one mass culture. The culture is fragmented. You have many different cultures. You have a lot of niches, a lot of taste communities. How are you going to reach all of them? You're not going to reach them 3 times a year. You need to reach them throughout the year. How are you going to reach them? You're going to reach them throughout different taste verticals. So you have Gordon Ramsay, you have Drive to Survive, you have fashion, you have luxury, you have hospitality, you have experiences, whatnot. So you have to have a lot of different cultural products organized and connected. And then you have packs and collaboration for fashion, for Gen Z, and so on. So you have to connect them all in a cultural program that rolls out throughout the year, and that one of those things amplifies the other. So they're all connected. So that is the whole idea. What Formula One has, it's unmistakable aesthetics that connects all of that. So different brands have different things that connects them. For Saint Laurent, again, it can be aesthetics, it can be different charters. It can be like, oh, we're just making edgy things. Like Jim Jarmusch is an indie filmmaker, Gucci, Saint Laurent, they're a little bit edgy, they're cooler than LVMH. I'm making this up. For me, that's that. For Formula One, is like, we want to invest in Gen Z women, we're going to do F1 Academy. That's one of the cultural products. That is that whole point. In fragmented culture, you need to have that carpet bombing, so to speak, but you have to have that diversification in terms of a cultural program.
And that's why I think leaning into as many different moments of cultural production within your company is so critical in this, that it's not 3 times a year you launch a campaign. It's not just one way you end up doing it. You really look for tons of different opportunities. And I think what's interesting is when I've had conversations with company leaders about this, they always kind of say like, well, how do I make my brand cool by putting something out there? And part of what we're talking about here is like, what are you already doing in a daily operations? And how can you take those moments of the way that you currently work? Again, just using the F1 example of people walking up and away from the track, and turn that into a cultural production moment. Because it doesn't require a heavy lift. It just requires some intention, some strategy behind it. And it can all of a sudden be something that builds brand equity, that, you know, leads to partnerships and collaborations that, had you not strategically thought about that piece of daily operations, would have just been in an inert part of how you operate. Now it's a critical brand building, fan engagement part of the business. But you have to really think about your business that way, because if you're always thinking about adding new appendages to the company, new studios, new this, new that, it just becomes unwieldy and it distracts you from the core business, which is one of the reasons why I like the F1 example so much. It's still part of the core business and how it operates. It's not forcing it to change per se. It's just, let's take this one piece of a person walking up and a driver's walking up and back from the track and just turn it into an opportunity.
I think it's easy for them. They have sports, they have racing, and they have that unmistakable aesthetic. So they will collaborate with Lego. It's like, oh, let's do a Lego set with recognizable aesthetic in a shape of F1 car, regardless of the mark. And I think this is really a good moment to shift towards hospitality, towards Rosewood hotels, as another example of very clear experience that can flex in different expressions of that experience. Yep. What are different cultural contexts that hospitality experience can exist in?
Okay, so for our third segment, we're going to talk about Rosewood Hotels. So this month, Rosewood Hotels announced it is evolving from a luxury hotel chain into a global lifestyle forum. The shift came as branded residence demand surged 70% since 2020, and the company expanded to over 30 new properties. And its parent company, New World Development, is betting on Rosewood as a long-term cultural asset. Rosewood is now building a continuous cultural ecosystem: original films, collectible design objects, lifestyle content, wellness concepts, and immersive experiences, all choreographed through a singular narrative of place and taste. From a value creation perspective, the benefits are very clear: higher cross-sell potential, new lines of monetizable experience, and building a brand multiple more akin to a cultural IP studio than a hotel chain. So what are your thoughts on that, Anna?
I have a lot of thoughts. So before I unload all of them, why don't you go?
Are you sure you have thoughts on that?
I do have, but I do have I have less on Rosewood. I have more on recently opened Ciro hotels in Dubai, which was it's basically a wellness hotel which has a giant gym with the hotel attached, together with the spa and classes and so on. And I do think that, like, speaking of IP, there are more of those thematic hotels for people who want one thing, who are either longevity or wellness or sports or yoga aficionados. And because, like, for example, Dishoom, this famous Indian restaurant in London, opened restaurant plus mini hotel with it. So the question is, why do you have a restaurant with the hotel attached to it? So this kind of extending very specific type of experience into adjacent experience. So that is, for me, what you just explained. It's kind of like having a brand, an IP. Again, I identify brands with IPs now, because brand before was a signal of quality. Now, for me, is intellectual property that can, what is your core business? How it allows you to grow beyond the category. And all brands need, in order to grow, they need to break out of their categories. Precisely what we just said, it's in the fragmented culture, you need to be adaptable you need to be present in many different cultural contexts, in a lot of different cultural niches. In order to do that, you need to exist as in many different expressions. And that is the subject of our next episode. You need to either build or collaborate. So we're going to get to that. In the meantime, how does Rosewood build a movie? How does Rosewood build design? What is wellness? What is a restaurant? So do they partner or do they build that themselves? So as we said, as an intellectual property, it makes a lot of sense for Rosewood to own all of that. Six Senses does the same thing. If you provide exceptional experience in terms of hospitality, you also want to put trademark on the food or food regimen that you provide. You want to also trademark a yoga method or a breathing method or a wellness method that you provide.
Yes. So like, I think the way that I think about this is I think Rosewood is a really good example of layered value. So you have a fixed asset of real estate and CapEx costs associated with building out these properties. And it's like super expensive, obviously, to revamp these properties. And you only want to do it every once in a while because you got to shut down the property and it's disruptive to people who are still visiting the property and stuff. So so really the game is how do you extract as much value from the initial investment as possible? And so when you define yourself as a hotel brand where what we sell is a night stay, it really just becomes about monetizing the room and being able to get utilization of those rooms throughout the year as much as possible. But when you start saying, no, what we're really doing is we're an IP company who happens to have as part of our portfolio a hotel, the IP becomes the focus, and you start saying it's a point of view, it's a story, it's a philosophy on curation, it is a opinionated walk through a certain experience, like whether that's wellness or whatever. And so all of a sudden, you can start layering in value on top of that experience. And I think, when you think of it that way, all of a sudden, Rosewood becomes a platform of products, more or less like actually an ecosystem of products where each product you add has, in theory, compounding value to the total experience. It makes all the other products more valuable, more desirable, more attractive. And so the idea of layering in film, layering in decorative objects, layering in food themes, layering in other types of content and stuff, because you've established a really strong physical experience, to me makes tons of sense because it's allowing you to monetize that in many different ways. But each time you monetize it, it makes the collective experience more desirable because it feels richer and deeper and more immersive than other places that you could stay. And when you, at the end of the day, want to stay at some place that feels deeply thoughtful and intentional in its design and experience versus some place that just looks nice.
Right. So that's kind of like you just described, having a brand universe.
Yep.
And the richer the brand universe is, the more valuable it is. And the richer the universe is, the less reason you have to go out of it and seek anything else. That's one. So I would say check. The other thing is, with all travel, that happens within a limited period of time. And if hospitality brands want to own the entire customer journey, they want to be present in their customers' lives well before that journey happens and well after. So they want to extend that customer journey for the entire year if possible. So that is the way to do that. So through content, you can do that. So you say, hey, you're going to be in our hotel in 6 months, but why don't you check our content now? If you're a member, you can have apparel now, you can enact that experience at home, and you have our gym membership. So go to the nearest hotel there. Yes, you're going to be, I don't know, in Bali, but you have in New York nearby, and you can go to our gym or spa if you're a member and so on. And then afterwards, there's so many add-ons that, as you just described, they can be present in your life outside your stay. So this is basically, again, how do you own that how do you monetize your members' data in order to provide as seamless experience as possible for the longest time as possible? And then in the recent years, we've seen that trend that is like, you don't even need to stay at the hotel. You have to create Aman tote bag or Aman robe. And now you have all those collaborations that are basically, you have Ritz Paris collaboration with Frame and sporty and rich collaboration. So you have like merch from the hotels as a status symbol. So that's basically expanding into, you don't need to stay there. It's not the point. The point is them as brands pervade your life outside of it. So that is, for me, the more touch points for outside life you have, the more valuable you are.
So just out of curiosity, I feel like hotels have done this in the past, whether they've made like bath products. Like I'm sure at some point the Ritz-Carlton made bath products and like licensed its brand for that. What is making what you're seeing in this hospitality space so different than what brands did in the 80s or the 90s, for example, in trying to offer something beyond the room key?
It's much more there. The culture outside was different. So there was not that merch culture. There was no culture, streetwear culture of drops, of collaborations. So there was no that status signaling outside of who knows. If you know, you know. So in the sense, like only rich people stayed at Ritz-Carlton or Paris Ritz or Raman. And that was like very clear. Status signaling was different. Aspiration was different. It was very bound just to money. It was not bound to taste, to knowledge, membership, and so on. So number one, culture was different. And second of all, have you seen what they've done? That stuff like sucked.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, I in no way was I saying it was good, but I think it's just like, it's an important thing to kind of like tease out for people who are listening who say, well, yeah, but this doesn't feel that new. But I think your point of like, the strategy might not be new, but the intention and the quality and the execution is better, significantly better than it was before. And then number two, the entire cultural context and media context has changed to where now these little things take on enhanced meaning beyond utility value. They have social value, they have cultural capital, they have signaling value in a way that it wasn't before. And when you have that and you have a sort of a media ecosystem where people show that off to signal for themselves, it just catches fire. Like I was reading, I don't remember where it was from, but basically the argument was that because housing prices have gone to historic highs and continue to go up, particularly in the United States, you have entire parts of the economy that, because they can't afford houses anymore, are putting all this money into luxury goods that confer status signaling to them. Because decades ago, buying a home was, a status signal of what you've achieved and stuff. And now that is so far out of reach of people, all this money is going into things that confer status. And so you get a lot more spending in the luxury space. You get things like, certain types of beauty products, certain types of like thermoses and stuff, certain types of t-shirts with logos on it that have outsized emotional value for the buyer, because those are the things now that they're buying to show status, to show success, to show cultural awareness. And they're really Instagrammable. And so you put all of that out. But that relationship between, what is achievable for people and what they can buy versus what they used to buy, I thought was a really interesting kind of insight into kind of how capital is flowing in a market that's searching for places to put capital, to signal status, to signal cultural awareness today. And that is very, very different than what it was in the 70s, 80s, or 90s.
I mean that, and then Instagram and the visual culture that was like way before the visual culture, before Kardashians, before like sort of, and wearing things ironically, like that was not, and now we are even post-ironic time, and it's like in a earnest time. So it's, yes, of course, there is that. And then there is also the fact that like with ChatGPT in the second world countries, their aspiration is, they're like, oh, give me an image of myself in a Lambo with Rolex watch and so on. Like seriously, that's kind of like, people are always going to aspire to look rich with the status signals of whatever is the status signaling of looking rich at that moment.
Well, I think this goes back to the point earlier, and then maybe we can use this as an off ramp into the podcast. But the point earlier about things becoming more physical, like the whole idea of like anybody can like use an image generator to throw a product on themselves or put them in a certain context, but to show up physically in a space that is either you had to know about it. To show up physically is a very different way of signaling status, because it's hard to do. You have to fly somewhere, you have to be somewhere, you have to be available to go to something, you have to know where to have shown up and stuff. And maybe that's just like an interesting part in all of this and how things are evolving as well.
Right. And then you have truly rich people, you're not going to find them in the Ritz anymore. They're going to be in some like hut with the clay floor, like sleeping, like in a yak.
Yes.
In a
like
Yeti. Without the phone or reception and everything. Like they're not like they don't signal status anymore. They're going to be in a wellness hotel and like off the grid. So that's why you're going to have like a sporty and rich hoodie from a man worn ironically, or you're going to have like a hoodie from some yacht party. So you're going to show people that you were there physically,
Yeah.
And only people who were there are going to recognize, oh, that's a signal that this person was invited with 50 other people and no one else is going to know what that means, So that is sort of different than before.
So let's bring this home. So what's been the through line for you in the conversation today?
Well, that in the fragmented cultural space, in a different cultural contexts, the only constant is intellectual property that brands have, and that can flex in the form of different cultural products that are connected in a program. And basically that an idea can live as a movie, as a TV show, or as a fashion collection, and that deeply impacts how fashion brands, what are dear to my heart, operate, and that what moves them organizationally is to operate more as entertainment studios. And what I'm mostly interested in is what entertainment studios are going to do with their potential fashion collections capsules. What is the merger between entertainment and fashion?
Yeah, for me, it's this idea that in being CMO as showrunner, it's really not about managing attention, but it's about orchestrating an ecosystem and trying to figure out how it all compounds on top of each other and creates IP, reinforces IP in a way that can be monetized, that can be an accelerant to core business sales, but also open up opportunities that either put you at the forefront of culture and part of a conversation that's going on, or opens you up to really interesting collaborations that enhance the perceived value of the core business. That, to me, I don't hear a lot of CMOs talk about that stuff. I hear some, but they're much more progressive on the forefront of that. But that is the real crux in all of this, I think.
Yes, CMOs as showrunners. Go to Sociology of Business, read more, and
always be selling.
Got to pay for those Aeron smoothies. And the next episode of Season 2 of Hitmakers, we are going to talk about collaborations.
Great. Thanks, Anna. I'll see you next time.
See you next time, Lee. Thank you.